Hello, and welcome to our next unit in Intro to Literature. We have just finished our fiction unit, and now we are moving into the second unit of the semester, which will be focused on drama. So, this PowerPoint is basically going to be like an introduction to drama, where I'll talk about the different elements of drama. And also how a lot of the elements compare to what we've already been doing the last month or so within our first fiction unit. So again, a lot of this, depending on our past experiences, might be a review of what we've sort of, been told before, talked about before. But some of it might be a little different. So again, that's why I like to do just a basic introduction, just to always start off, a new unit of literature. So this slide is talking about the differences. So I would make the safe bet that the main difference between what we've been doing within the fiction unit and then also, coming up in our final poetry unit and within this new drama unit, a lot of it stems, or a lot of the differences stem from the playwright. So if you're not familiar, an author, a writer, or a poet is associated with fiction and poetry. A playwright is somebody who writes plays. Drama writers. And the main difference between these two types of writers is that playwrights are usually almost always assuming or hoping that the plays that they take the time to write will be performed, right? So I like to take a step back before I get into the different elements of drama, and ask, my students, what has been our past experience in reading plays, whether it was, in high school, maybe even earlier, just general K through 12, or potentially in our past English class. And, what was that experience like? Do we remember the plays that we've had to read? And, why were they always Shakespeare, right? And typically, because Shakespeare tends to be sort of like, pivotal for the drama unit, that is one of the reasons why I stay away from reading Shakespeare in my English classes. I hope that the play that we will be reading, I hope that we've heard of it, obviously, but I also hope that we haven't read it before. And again, I will go into a lot more about that in the next PowerPoint. But yeah, so when it comes to the quiz for these slides, I will probably have a question about, tell me about your past experience in reading a play. What was that like? And then I'll also have a question about, have we ever seen plays performed live? Because that's the other aspect of it, right? Fiction, poetry, they tend to be very, singular, a solo experience for the reader. Obviously, there, is spoken word or jam poetry, which we will talk about in our final unit. But all plays, they are intended to be performed and obviously have an audience that is watching the performance. In many ways, the audience and the actors are working together because the audience, they will have some type of like verbal response, even if it's just clapping, right? At the end of every song or at the end of every scene. There's some sort of like, verbal or just, in general sound response. So the actors know like, hey, we're doing what we have to do, like we're getting, the messages across or whatever it may be. So as you'll see here, I have an image of Lin-Manuel Miranda from Hamilton. Obviously, if you could not already tell by my welcome photo, I am the biggest fan of Hamilton. And that's just one example, right? Of like the highest degree, a musical that when it first came out about a decade ago, it literally took the world by storm. And now, it's still on Broadway. It's also now touring. They've got touring groups that go across the country. It's also being performed, to my understanding, in like high school productions. So, we have these like big, like Wicked and Kinky Boots and like Mamma Mia, these really big like Broadway level performances. All the way down to, elementary school, right? So the other question I will probably have is, have we seen any Broadway productions, or have we seen any productions, or have we been involved in productions in the past, So yeah, if you do have experience at either performing or set design or what's a stage crew, right? Like, and I don't care how big of an extravagant, production it was, all the way down to like the local. If you can, draw from that experience and just sort of your experience in watching these performances. Because a lot of that will translate to how we read the play. So basically, in terms of reading drama in general, it's, a lot of it, obviously, you're still reading. So a lot of it is similar to reading prose. You're going to be anticipating what's going to happen next. You're going to be imagining the characters, the setting, the actions, looking for symbols, identifying themes. The next few slides talk about the dramatic elements, and I will specifically talk about how they, basically already compare to what we have been doing in the fiction unit. But then there's going to be a few major differences as well, right? So number one here, there will be no narrator. There will obviously be stage directions. So those are the italicized, bits where they talk about what the set looks like. They might introduce the characters as they come onto, the stage or the scene. They will talk you through if there's like an action moment. But depending on the play, they tend to be kind of few and far between. So, because of that, going to number two, there's a lot more focus on the dialogue to understand what's happening, to kind of, put you as the reader, get you like a solid image of what might be happening. If you might want to imagine yourself as, I'm sitting in this empty theater, and whenever I begin a new scene or a new moment, how do I see the characters moving and interacting on the stage in front of me? And so because of that, it's really important that going to number three, actually, we use our imaginations to help fill in the holes, because obviously we only know what is being said or given to us from a character's background through stage directions. So a lot of it is really up to our interpretation. So hopefully, if you're not already in the habit of kind of visualizing whatever it is that you're reading, especially if we went back into the fiction unit, you want to get into that habit for this unit, because, it's important to be able to kind of track what's going on, again, almost on like an invisible stage before you. And again, every little thing that the playwright includes is there for a greater reason. So that's also why it's important to, not that we want to keep track of every single thing, but you want to take note of like what's on the page, but maybe also what's not on the page. So again, in terms of the elements of drama, I offer some questions, and this is more, when we get into the next paper, questions that you might come back to depending on what you want to focus on for our drama paper. So I'm actually going to skip over these slides. And then, for the last couple moments here, I really just want to talk about how these elements are, again, similar to what we've already been doing and a little bit different. And with the intention of this being a good setup for introducing the play in the next PowerPoint. And obviously I have, the page numbers up here if you ever want to go back into our ebook and reference any of these elements a little bit more. So in terms of character, again, like I previously said, we do not get a lot of description on these characters. We will know their names, and we will, I'm sort of thinking specifically into Fences right now, we will get a little bit of a description of, what they look like, a little tiny bit of personality as they first enter the play in like the first couple scenes. But everything beyond that is in very small, stage directions, mostly dependent on our imaginations. So, we had talked about characterization in terms of fiction. The characterization that we will practice in drama is going to be indirect. So again, it's not directly stated on the page, but you are making like a guesstimate, not so much an assumption, but like guessing what's happening based on the little detail that we are given. In terms of plot and structure, so I'm sure we're already familiar. Plays have different acts and then scenes. So if we think about, I'm just using Hamilton as an example. If we think about Hamilton, that play or that musical has 2 acts, and then there are multiple scenes within it, right? And the scenes in musicals are a little bit different than the more concrete scenes in dramas. So in terms of Fences, there's also going to be 2 acts, and then there's 4 scenes in Act 1 and 5 scenes in Act 2. And traditionally, the break between Act 1 and 2 is the intermission, right? And again, traditionally, the way the play or the musical is set up, the ending of Act 1 is supposed to enact, almost like a cliffhanger type of moment, so that it encourages the audience to come back to finish, the play. So Hamilton infamously ends with the song Nonstop. There's a lot of, everybody comes together, and they're all on the stage, and it's, this pivotal moment for the character of Alexander Hamilton and his family. And the same thing happens at the end of Act 1 for Fences. It's a very emotionally kind of strained scene. And so I'm sure we'll talk about it when that time comes. In terms of setting, none of that really changes. It's the time and place in which a play is occurring. August Wilson, the playwright, does set up the setting at the very beginning of the play. We know exactly when, we can kind of guesstimate where we are. And again, we get sort of an overarching description of what's on the stage. And for the most part, that same set design and props continues throughout the rest of the play. And then next we have tone. So again, we had spoken about this, I believe, in regards to like narration, right? So the tone is the emotional kind of response, of the reader. So how are we understanding what's on the page? And then also monologues are a part of that. So there will be a few monologues in this play. And for the most part, they're only coming from 1 or 2 people. So again, that's where we're getting a lot of maybe the background info or exposition that we're missing from it being a play. And then finally, with theme, that is never going to change. What is the play about? What are the main messages behind it? And all of the elements work together to arrive